few films capture the surreal, frantic, and darkly comedic energy of life spiraling out of control, quite like Martin Scorsese's After Hours, released in 1985. At first glance, it plays as a simple urban odyssey. One man, one night, one increasingly absurd sequence of events, but beneath the surface lies a story shaped by exhaustion, reinvention, studio turmoil, downtown New York City culture, and a director searching for a creative reset. After Hours is much more than a quirky black comedy. It is the story of Scorsese's road to artistic rediscovery. It is a movie born out of crisis and shaped by the gritty authenticity of early 80s SoHo. The film became a turning point in Scorsese's career and a unique entry in the landscape of American independent cinema. Once again, as he had done in his early years, Martin Scorsese took to the main streets of New York to recover from a series of setbacks, drug-fueled movie shoots, and flops at the box office. He needed a reset, and his muse of the city of New York would come to his aid once again. By the early 1980s, Martin Scorsese was burnt out. His long, obsessive production of Raging Bull took a huge emotional and physical toll on the 38-year-old filmmaker. The failure of New York, New York still lingered fresh in his memories and in the memories of critics and audiences throughout the land, and people were asking themselves, has Marty Scorsese lost it? His passion project, the long-trodden The Last Temptation of Christ, after years of planning and blood, sweat and tears, had collapsed at the last minute due to studio panic over its controversial subject matter. Years of work evaporated overnight. Scorsese was frustrated, exhausted, and unsure of where to go next. Enter After Hours, a script that arrived at the perfect moment. It was a small, contained, modestly budgeted film that didn't require enormous sets, battle sequences, or studio wars. It promised something Scorsese desperately needed: a creative palate cleanser. In his early days, Scorsese mastered the art of location shooting with Mean Streets, Taxi Driver, and Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. After Hours was something he could do because he had experience at low-budget, fast-paced shooting schedules, and best of all, it was a script that would allow him to experiment with the camera and tell the visual story with the energy that only Martin Scorsese has. The film's script was written by Joseph Minion at 26 years old, and co-producer Amy Robinson grabbed it fast when she discovered the script at Sundance. Joseph Minion's screenplay began as a class assignment at Columbia University, a wild, Kafkaesque journey through SoHo's art scene and late-night subcultures. A very young man's movie indeed, filled with a young man's ideas on life. It blended paranoia, absurdity, and the unique electricity of New York City after dark. Amy Robinson thought the film was ominous, as well as hilarious, and offered something refreshingly weird to the independent film world. It captured a slice of New York nightlife that was both surreal, but yet sharply observed by a keen New Yorker, which was something, I think at the same time, Scorsese was feeling in the restless energy of trying to get his next film off the ground and suffering from a massive blow to his ego over the last few years. And importantly, After Hours was a project he could shoot quickly, cheaply, and with far less pressure than his previous films. Little did he know the movie that would reset his entire career was heading his way. Amy Robinson took the screenplay to her producing partner and out-of-work actor Griffin Dunne, who said on the making of the film, he was tired of waiting for roles, so he just decided to produce his own, and After Hours was their next project. The narrative follows Paul Hackett, an ordinary office worker whose attempt at a simple late-night date turns into a labyrinth of bizarre encounters, escalating mishaps and increasingly nightmarish detours. New York becomes hostile, mysterious, and oddly whimsical. At first, the unique blend of anxiety and humor that the script offered was met with mixed responses when the co-producing pair of Dunne and Robinson started shopping the script around.
Some people would read it in Hollywood, by the way. We we were trying to get it financed and set up, and people would either read it and think it was extremely funny, or they would get so upset they would throw it across the room and say, I got a terrible headache and I couldn't finish that. So we knew it was very extreme, which we thought was good.
Robinson, who had appeared as an actress in Scorsese's early masterpiece Mean Streets, thought he would be great to direct this crazy dark comedy off the back of her admiration for the king of comedy and the darker side of the comedy world that Scorsese had explored in that earlier movie. But at that time, Scorsese was still trying to get The Last Temptation of Christ off the ground before its eventual cancellation. So, the producing pair turned to a little-known Disney animator who had just directed a short film named Vincent and offered him the job as the director of After Hours, and that director was a very young Tim Burton. But a few months into pre-production on After Hours, Scorsese's movie, The Last Temptation of Christ, fell apart, and he decided he wanted to do After Hours for his next project instead, and a very humble but yet very gracious Tim Burton withdrew from the making of the movie.
He said, wait a minute, did you say Martin Scorsese wants to do this movie? I'm like, yeah. He goes, and you signed it to him first? And we went, well, yeah. And he went, I gracefully withdraw from the project. I do not want to stand in the way of anything Martin Scorsese wants to do.
What appealed to Scorsese about After Hours was its rhythms. He said making the king of comedy with a studio had really taken a lot out of him, and he loved the fact that After Hours was independent and that the story moved like a fever dream, each scene tumbling into the next with maniac momentum. He recognized in it the same nervous energy that might have propelled a movie like Taxi Driver, but channeled through dark comedy rather than psychologically damaging drama. He chose to shoot the whole movie at night, even the interiors, and that gave the movie a vampiric tone that really made the atmosphere of the movie work for the cast and crew so they could truly feel the nighttime madness of After Hours. What separates this movie from the rest is that Scorsese knew the city and he knew his craft. Every frame of After Hours was storyboarded, and Scorsese made the shot list available to anyone who wanted to see it so that him, the cast, and the crew were all on exactly the same page. Actor Griffin Dunne said it was amazing, and it allowed every member of the cast to fully understand exactly what the tone and style of the movie was that they were making. They were capturing the seedy and dangerous side of downtown New York art scene of the early 1980s, filled with eccentric characters like artists, filled with punk clubs, experimental theaters, and strange basement gatherings. Scorsese was making a surreal movie based around art, insanity, and the city, going back to his indie roots, and once again, putting his soul up there on the screen for everyone to see in shining Technicolor. Scorsese wanted to capture a city that felt alive, dangerous, unpredictable, and filled with personality. And Griffin Dunne also said he was more than a little influenced by the madness of Martin Scorsese himself in the creation of his performance.
I think he said, as a matter of fact, I know he said, he related very much to Paul Hackett. I always felt like I was playing a certain version of him at that point in his life. I remember Marty telling me when Last Temptation of Christ was finally canceled, then he got a phone call from the studio head. They just started laughing. He was very upset, obviously, but they just, what are you gonna do? Just started laughing. So Marty really delighted in the awful things that happened to Paul Hackett.
The making of After Hours was a strangely harmonious blend of meticulous direction and unpredictable chaos, appropriately mirroring the film's story itself. Working with a much smaller budget than his last few movies of around $4.5 million, Scorsese returned to a guerrilla style of filmmaking reminiscent of his earlier days. Night shoots dominated the schedule, plunging the cast and crew into the same sleep-deprived delirium that our protagonist Paul Hackett experiences on screen. Most of the film was shot on location in SoHo long before it became the high-end shopping district that it is today. At that time, it was a patchwork of artists' lofts, industrial buildings, and half-deserted nighttime nightmarish streets, an ideal playground for the movie's surreal aesthetic that Scorsese wanted to capture. And on screen, the streets look ominous, dangerous, and yet absolutely beautiful in terms of their cinematography. Dunne spent nearly every scene on screen, and often filmed from dusk till dawn. His genuine fatigue, confusion, and frazzled nerves gave authenticity to Paul's escalating panic. And this panic was something that Martin Scorsese could apparently relate to, as Dunne said that during scenes when things get really bad for Paul and the world just seems to be beating him down relentlessly, he would often hear little sniggers coming from behind the camera lens.
And when I was acting and the camera would be on me this way and I'd be going through some horrific Paul Hackettism kind of moment, I could see Marty in the corner of the frame. Sometimes you have to turn away and I just see his back, just unable, trying to hold back from laughing, and I'd hear these little sounds. And he just found it hilarious what was happening to him. It always reminded me of that moment he was telling me when his picture was canceled. What are you gonna do? Just laugh.
Scorsese and cinematographer Michael Ballhaus crafted camera movements that heightened the absurdity of the movie's story. Long tracking shots, sudden zooms, and frantic movement became part of the comedy itself. One great story is that of the infamous key drop, when the camera was literally tied to a plank of wood between two bungee cords and then dropped from a very high height towards actor Griffin Dunne to simulate the perspective of the keys hurtling towards him in a world where everything, even a set of keys, could be dangerous. This was true guerrilla-style filmmaking at its best, and that energy shows completely in the movie. In fact, when the movie wrapped, Scorsese told the crew that he had once again found his love for telling stories and making movies, one that the studios had kicked out of him before working on After Hours. One thing that was constantly in debate was how to end the movie. There were multiple ideas from everyone involved, including Paul dying, fleeing the city, or escaping through various surreal twists, but none of them felt quite right. One famous alternate ending was that an artist, played by Verna Fields in the movie, would, rather than wrap Paul up in the papier-mâché and clay, as what happens in the end of the movie, would actually have had Paul crawl up inside of her body, and then he would have literally been reborn again out of her on the main freeway back up to uptown New York. Now I realize this would have been one of the most surreal moments of the film and may have fit the vibe that Scorsese wanted exactly, but for me that would have been a little bit too crazy, and I think that would have taken the last vestige of any reality out of the movie. Then, quite out of the blue, filmmaker Michael Powell, who was the partner of Scorsese's incredible editor and collaborator Thelma Schoonmaker, saw a cut of the film and said, "Why doesn't Paul end up right back at his desk at work, as if the night from hell has deposited him back exactly where he started?" At first, Scorsese said, "Thanks for that, but no, that's not quite right." But then later, he realized, of course, that it was perfect. It's cynical, it's cruel, and darkly hilarious. Everything that After Hours was all about. The insanity of working 9 to 5 may be the most insane thing that Paul Hackett does in the whole movie. Maybe it's the artists, deranged cab drivers, and the other nut jobs that live by night that are the ones who are truly living life to the fullest. Don't you think? Martin Scorsese described the film as an emotional reset, something that allowed him to regain his passion for filmmaking after years of professional turbulence and turmoil. It led directly to him regaining momentum and ultimately making one of my favorite movies of his, The Color of Money, which reignited his Hollywood status. Without After Hours, Scorsese's career might have taken a very, very different path. It stands as a rare gem in American cinema, a small, strange, exhilarating film that captures the spirit of a city, the anxiety of modern life, and the creative rebirth of one of cinema's greatest directors. It is a movie that thrives on chaos, but every moment of that chaos is precisely controlled by the maestro, Martin Scorsese. It is funny, unsettling, bizarre, and entirely unforgettable. And in the history of the master of cinema's work, it represents a turning point, a moment when he stepped back from the large-scale ambition of his previous projects to rediscover the sheer joy of filmmaking. Like Paul Hackett's endless night in SoHo, After Hours is a reminder that sometimes being lost is the fastest way to find yourself again. Thanks for listening.
Different rules apply when it gets this late, you know what I mean? It's like after hours.
Thanks, Peter.
Sure, Marcy. Have a good evening.